The White House says President Joe Biden has spoken to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the phone, and Netanyahu has again reiterated that Israel will not institute a ceasefire.
Well, there will be no ceasefire, general ceasefire in Gaza without the release of our hostages. As far as tactical little pauses, an hour here, an hour there, we've had them before. I suppose we'll check the circumstances in order to enable goods, humanitarian goods to come in, or our hostages, individual hostages to leave. But I don't think there's going to be a general ceasefire.
We're going to speak to Sarah Khairat. She's joining us from occupied East Jerusalem. Sarah, what more do we know about this conversation?
Yeah, well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been saying this for a while, that there wouldn't be a full ceasefire at any point throughout this war. And this was the conversation that he had also with the US President Joe Biden overnight in a phone call that was made, where the White House said they discussed this potential pause, tactical pause, they've called it, where it would only be for a small amount of time, a small window that would not only allow people from the north that we've been seeing move to the south, but also to allow more humanitarian aid in. The US has said many times that it supports Israel not having a full ceasefire, but it's pushing for these temporary pauses to allow more humanitarian aid in, for example. However, the caveat here is that Israel, even in that interview, had said, this interview was with ABC News in Australia, where he did say that maybe an hour here or an hour there, but the condition is that there would be full release of all of those being held captive. So it sounds like, from what he's saying, is that the only time they would consider this is that the captives would all be freed, and it would only be during that period of freeing them that there would be a pause. Israel has maintained that their concern is that, and this is the same with the US, that if there was a longer ceasefire, let's say a day or two, that this would give Hamas time to regroup and get together and implement a plan to fight the Israeli forces. They already say they have a strong momentum as they move further into Gaza City, and that they want to continue to maintain that.
Sarah Khairat talking to us from occupied East Jerusalem. Sarah, thank you.
We got a lot to talk about. It seems that every day there are new updates, and it just gets worse and worse. Over 10,500 people are now reported dead, approximately 30,000 injured, and now 1.5 million displaced. They are no longer just going south, they're now going north, which means that Jordan and Egypt might be having to forcefully take in refugees, although right now there seems to be no mass exodus outside of Gaza, it seems, as Israel bombards the Palestinians to the point where now it's just becoming too large to ignore. So let's get right to what's going on in the news. There's, like I said, there's a lot. So large blast, this is breaking news right off Al Jazeera. Large blast reported near Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. We are receiving reports of a large explosion near Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. Reuters news agency reports that people gathered outside the hospital could be seen running for cover following the sound of a huge impact. The heads of the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees and the World Health Organization said earlier that conditions at Al-Shifa, Gaza's largest hospital, were disastrous. The emergency rooms overflowing with the sick and wounded. Now, of course, there's a lack of goods. There's a lack of medical needs here, instruments, a lack of running water, electricity. It's just like all the other hospitals are destroyed. Very few hospitals are operating, and the Israeli military knows this. The government knows this. And bombing hospitals is a war crime. I don't care if there's a Hamas tunnel underneath it. You cannot bomb a hospital with civilians. It violates every international law that we have available. It violates the natural moral order. And the only ones who are advocating for this are the ultra-nationalists, Christian evangelicals with this grotesque and morbid tie to Zionism. And this very perverse religious logic I called illogic, which is even biblical. Oh, we destroyed a tunnel, but we killed 300 people. Oh, well, that's the price. Doctors are being forced to provide treatment in the hospital's corridors, on the floor, and outdoors. 5,000 patients receiving care, 800 patients waiting to be admitted, thousands of displaced civilians sheltering, including human rights workers. Have you ever met a country that just slaughters everything? Say what you want about the corrupt government of Russia and the Ukraine war. But with Israel, it just seems that we don't care, because we don't care about what international law says. We don't care what any law says, even moral law. The only thing that matters is we get rid of the Palestinians. And if we have to kill human rights workers, American or not, so be it. Netanyahu pursuing policy of vengeance against Palestinians, ex-French prime minister says. I mean, the coalition governments are basically saying, all right, grotesque governments like the United States, France, I guess they have their limits too. In an interview with France Info, former French Prime Minister Dominique de Villepin said that the government of Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu bears direct responsibility for failing to secure his country on October 7th. That's one. Villepin, who once served as French foreign minister, said that the second failure of Netanyahu is encouraging a policy of occupation and colonization. That's two. And three, a second Nakba, which is exactly what's happening. With the Israeli government's response to the October 7th Hamas attack, Villepin said, force does not ensure the security of the Israeli people. That's right. Violence begets violence. What did Christ say in the Bible? Those who live by the sword will die by the sword. He added that the rationale for the bombings in Gaza is flawed, that the Netanyahu government is pursuing a policy of vengeance. Vengeance by who? The Arab nations. Oh, but Israel was attacked in the Six-Day War. That was 60 years ago, friend. You think history started October 7th? This was the response. I didn't say it was a right response by Hamas, but it was expected. How long could you say that for over 76 years, with the forced displacement, the military occupation of Arab lands, your own civilians, Palestinians, Arabs are civilians in Israel, you take away their homes, put in racially segregated checkpoints, take control of the water, slaughter their children, and you didn't expect an attack? A response of even? How many times can you say anti-Semitism is the same now as saying it's Hamas? Everything is Hamas. The buildings that we bomb, the hospitals that we bomb, the refugee centers, the schools, it's all Hamas. Everything's Hamas. It no longer works. The majority of the people around the world are protesting. We haven't seen this large protest since the Iraq War 2003, the protesting of it. And I think that's going to be much more expansive as long as this continues. Israel has the right to defend itself. It does not have the right to carry out an indiscriminate killing of civilians. As Foreign Minister Villepin became famous after he expressed France's opposition to the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq. United Nations chief says Gaza deaths shows something clearly wrong with Israel's military operation. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that the number of civilians killed in the Gaza Strip showed that there is something clearly wrong with Israel's military operations against Hamas, Reuters reports. Clearly wrong. It's not like, oh, maybe something's wrong. No, it's clear what's going on here. You are, in fact, how many Hamas operatives are there? 10, 20,000? Are you saying now that the civilians are all Hamas? I mean, how can you justify this? 4,000 of them are children. And you have the nerve, you nationalists out there, you God sakes, the nerve, 140 babies were beheaded, right? It's 4,000 fucking children. What's the difference? The difference is, and let's be honest, you hypocrites, is because they're brown. They don't meet the standard requirements to your eyes because you're racists. I'm calling you out because I can, because I'm non-partial. And anyone who knows me knows I am. I don't have any skin in the game. I care about humanity. I shouldn't, but I have to, because that's what we need for a better future. And in order to do that, you have to report honestly. I criticize Arab nations all the time. Take a look at my channel. There are violations by Hamas when they have human shields. But when one looks at the number of civilians that were killed with military operations, there is something that is clearly wrong, Gutierrez told Reuters next. It is also important to make Israel understand that it is against the interests of Israel to see every day the terrible image of the dramatic humanitarian needs of the Palestinian people, Gutierrez said. That doesn't help Israel in retaliation to the global public opinion. Gutierrez compared the number of children being killed in Gaza with the toll in conflicts around the world that he reports on annually. No country on the face of this earth has killed more children than Israel. It's not even close. And according to the United Nations reports, to Amnesty International, Israel has killed more children in this conflict. And we're talking October 7th. 1 month, they've killed more children than all the world's combined this year. My God. More so than at one point the largest humanitarian crisis, which is Yemen. That's U.S. supported. U.S. supports Saudi Arabia in that. By the way, aren't we supposed to be suing Saudi Arabia in the courts of the public in the Southern District of New York regarding their involvement with the 9/11 attacks? It's funny that we're allied to the countries with the worst human rights record on the planet, Israel and Saudi Arabia. You say which one about Russia, North Korea. They're up there. But right now, holy fucking shit. It's funny because the countries that we are engaged in conflict with are the countries we should be allied with. Iran has their problems. The religious mullahs. But are they any worse than Israel? When was the last time Iran was in a war? Well, they started one. Who's killed more people? Israel or Iran? I don't think it's close. And what is, in the United States and all this, the instigators that they are, Intercept did a piece, say which one about the Intercept, but Ken Klippenstein wrote a good article about the United States having secret operations and sending military aid to Israel, not to Ukraine, not to Russia, not to Ukraine, not to Yemen. That's public, but to Israel. And the reason why is because Israel's coming under attack internationally for their ridiculous, disproportionate violence. So the United States, they're thinking about elections next year. Biden administration put a 3-page list of arms for Ukraine, but information on weapons sent to Israel could fit in one sentence, Ken Klippenstein wrote today. A retired Marine general who worked in the region, who asked for anonymity because he was not authorized by his former employer to speak publicly, attributed the secrecy to the political sensitivity of the conflict. In particular, the retired officer said weapons used in door-to-door urban warfare, which are likely to result in civilian casualties, are not going to be something the administration wants to publicize. The National Security Council did not respond to a request for comment. In recent years, flare-ups of violence between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip have often entailed Israeli air wars with limited numbers of Israeli troops entering the besieged coastal enclave. Not this time. And Israel's getting their asses handed in a guerrilla or urban type warfare. They're not built like that. The last time there was a large-scale ground incursion by the Israeli Defense Forces into Gaza was during the Israelis' 2014 Operation Protective Edge. On Monday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told ABC News, Israel will, for an indefinite period, will have the overall security responsibility because we've seen what happens when we don't have it. Hamas attack on Israel, which took place on October 7th, resulted in a cascade of arms assistance from the United States, though the Biden administration at first declined to identify any specific weapons systems. As details trickled out in the press, it has gradually acknowledged some. These include precision-guided munitions, small diameter bombs, artillery, ammunition, Iron Dome interceptors, and other criminal equipment, as Pentagon spokesman Brigadier General Pat Ryder has said. Notice the weapons are precision weapons. So that means that Israel cannot be using the argument that we're just dropping that the weapons they use are indiscriminate, because they're large scale. No, these are precision. So in other words, they know exactly what they're targeting. They're targeting hospitals, schools, refugee centers, large percentage of populations of the Palestinians in enclaves. They know exactly what they're doing. U.S. envoy urges restoring calm on the Lebanon-Israeli border because now it's extending beyond this. They're trying to engage Hezbollah. And right now, the story is that West Bank is now fully engaged. I mean, you have Israeli military going door to door, arresting Palestinians in the West Bank for scrolling on the internet terrorist activity, just by scrolling. Not being terrorists themselves or terrorist sympathizers, but scrolling and looking at information. Go look it up. It's on the internet. I saw it for myself. I'm not making this up. The only democracy in the Middle East. Meanwhile, they're the most authoritarian, the most nationalist. The United States does not want to see conflict in Gaza escalating and expanding into Lebanon, Hochstein told this press conference in Beirut, because the United States basically has a split regarding a war with Iran, Lebanon, Syria, because they know this ain't Iraq, this ain't Afghanistan, it's not going to be easy. American soldiers are at risk of dying in the thousands. If Iran was such a pushover, we would have engaged. The one good thing about Barack Obama, who's a fucking war criminal and a piece of garbage human, basically did not engage with Iran because he said he didn't want Iraq 2.0. Now, coming off the Bush administration, in which was a mitigated disaster, the largest cost of human life, 1 million, or whatever estimates, 1.3 million regarding Iraq. Obama didn't want that on his record. And Netanyahu looked on him disfavorably. In fact, many people said that Obama was an anti-Semite. But at the end of his administration, he gave Israel the largest financial deal package in history. So much for that. Also, Obama was an AIPAC supporter, so there's that too. Restoring calm along the southern border is of utmost importance to the United States, and it should be the highest priority for both Lebanon and Israel. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Blinken visited Netanyahu. Lebanon was one of the items that they discussed. Now, either Netanyahu ignored Blinken, well, fuck that, we're going to engage Hezbollah, or Blinken basically said, at least make it appear that you're not engaging them, but we're ready. We got the ships in the Mediterranean. Since Hamas militants launched a shock October 7th attack, shock. It wasn't a shock. The IDF, by their own admittance, and I reported this in a previous video, they knew it was coming. This is not a secret. They told them, hey, Hamas is by the border. They're digging tunnels by the fence. Don't worry. They're just farmers. I mean, it's no longer, a crazed conspiracy to say that Israel intelligence, at least some part of it, or the Israeli government knew the attack was going to happen. They benefited from the attack. How did they benefit? Yeah, the Israelis died. But so for the greater good, the greater point is that we get the Palestinians out of Gaza and out of the West Bank. That's the ultimate goal. And if it comes at the price of some Jews, so what? So be it. You don't think governments think about that? Look how many people they kill. Look at the United States, for example. They knew Al-Qaeda was here in the year 2000. The intelligence services knew. Lives could be at stake. Remember what the CIA did in 1999? George Tenet said, we are at war with Al-Qaeda. This is 99. And knew that Khalid al-Mihdhar and the Wahhabis, they knew they were Al-Qaeda and they were inside the United States. They told the FBI, don't tell headquarters. Putting American lives at risk. And what happened? 9/11 happened. Who benefited? Did the people? No. Did the CIA? Well, they got an expanded contract, expanded blank checks from the Bush administration. That's what they did. Hell, George Tenet got the Presidential Medal of Freedom. A piece of garbage who deserves to be on the gallows for what he did. Palestinian militants from both Hamas and Islamic Jihad have claimed attacks and infiltrating attempts from Lebanon, while Israel has been striking the country's south and sending reconnaissance drones across the border, according to the official national news agency. Everybody is telling Israel at this point, you're just committing genocide at this point. It doesn't, these attacks don't even make sense. And why is this happening? If everybody and their mother is like coming out, the United States is telling Israel, hey, listen, at least on paper, it's saying, hey, listen, let's tell the United States is saying the biggest warmonger on the face of the earth. Well, there's a reason. And then the darker, more nefarious reason is that Israel is led by this very insidious far-right group. Not everybody in Israel is far right. There's a large contingent of moderate Israelis in government compared to this group, which is gaining steam. And remember, the Likud are the majority in the Knesset. They may suffer because of this, but there is a gradually growing influence of this religious and nationalist mindset that is forming under the Netanyahu administration. And these people are settlers and ultra-nationalists. France 24. From outrage to hate, in the wake of October 7th, Israel's far right seeks to extend its influence. Remember what I warned in previous videos. that there is going to be a growing sentiment of this very perverse, nationalist, ultra-religious right point of view under Netanyahu. Ministers from Israel's extreme right have been making increasingly controversial statements since the Hamas attacks on October 7th in a game of one-upmanship that has seen the right wing seek to extend its influence over Israel's government and beyond. I warned that if they do, this will be the final government of Israel. And my fear is that these people want the end. If they cannot have a country, it's the end of the world. It's not, I'm not being an extremist. If you know me, I'm not an extremist in every sense of the word. But these people are no different than ISIS. And these people have nuclear weapons. It's a fucking scary thought. Excuse my English. I don't like cursing, but, you know, life and death here. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but these people cannot be in positions, but they just cannot. In a radio interview on November 4th, Israel's heritage minister, Amihal Elihu, said there were no non-combatants in Gaza. He is making no distinction between civilian and Hamas. None. They're all the same, in other words, in Gaza, before adding that providing medical aid to the enclave would amount to a failure. Dropping a nuclear bomb on the Gaza Strip would be one of the options for dealing with Hamas, he said. I said this in the previous video. It just, who says these things? Who? Even the American government are careful with their words. I mean, imagine somebody in a Muslim nation saying this. We're at war. It's almost like we're going to war. We got to get these people out. You know, it's you hypocrites, you conservative hypocrites like Jenna Ellis and Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin. You're more worried about Iran getting a nuclear weapon. Look what this fucker has to say. He's an Israel government. You're a hypocrite. And he's coming right out and said there's no distinction between civilian and Hamas. They're all the same. Kill them all. You worried about Iran? Eliyahu was a member of the religious supremacist party Otzma Yehuda, the Jewish Power, part of Israel's ruling coalition, a Kahanist. The group founded under the late Rabbi Meir Kahane, who's an ultra-nationalist. Public outrage was swift and furious. Amihal Eliyahu has got to go, ran a military headline in the Jerusalem Post on November 6th. Liberal newspaper Haaretz went further with a call to the Israeli far right altogether. So that's why for you anti-Jews out there hiding under the banner of anti-Zionist, you know, at least we got a lot of criticisms. And ironically, it's coming from Israel. Not from the United States, not from anybody else. It's Israel criticizes Israel more than any other country. So they're good Jews. Not everybody's a fucking nut job. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was also quick to condemn the statement, saying Eliyahu was divorced from reality before suspending him from government meetings until further notice. Doesn't sound like something a savvy politician would say. Itzan Tezeglov, a specialist in Israeli politics at the University of East Anglia in the UK, Angela in the UK, it is just outrageous and so wrong on many levels. One of them being that Israel has never fully acknowledged it has the nuclear bomb. But it does, because we have whistleblower Mordecai Vanunu basically tell us. Thank goodness. Mordecai Vanunu's an angel. That's why they imprisoned him. For those who don't know, Google Mordecai Vanunu. Read his story. Tezeglov said such declaration. I hope I'm saying his. I know I'm butchering his name. Thanks to my New York accent. Says such declarations are symptomatic of a culture of one-upmanship among politicians on Israel's extreme right have been vying to make increasingly outlandish statements since the deadly Hamas attacks in Israel on October 7th. Omir Bremer, an Israeli analyst and specialist in Mideast geopolitics at the International Team of the Study of Security Verona, says these declarations have included warnings that Arab Israelis are about to embark on a violent campaign within Israel. A national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, Dracula as I call him, who is also leader of the Otzma Yehuda's party, or that Jews murdered in the West Bank are more important than Jews murdering in Gaza, because the former are right-wing settlers and the latter are left-wing kibbutz members from Simcha Rothman of the far-right religious Zionist party. Elihu's comments on nuclear weapons were not his first brush with the controversy. In a Facebook post from November 1st, he wrote that North Gaza was more beautiful than ever following Israel's bombardments. This is what's next after Netanyahu. This is what's coming. And if there are no Palestinians in Israel, the ruling voting governments will be left and right. And this is what represents the right. Because the Palestinians never vote pro-Zionist. Arab Israelis vote liberal or moderate or centrist. They hardly ever vote right, if at all. You don't think they know this? It's the reason why they want them out. He called it for the mass movement of Palestinians out of Gaza, reiterating a long-standing and controversial talking point from the extreme religious right. Right now, the conflicts involving outside the borders are on pause. And that's because the United States are basically not fully engaged. That's why Hezbollah and Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, has basically not engaged in all-out war. He's waiting. He's waiting to see the next step. He's waiting to see if Israel will expand on its aggressive military tactics into Gaza. And I'm willing to say that once it does, and once it fully engages the West Bank, we might see that response. And I don't, I sound like a broken record at this point, but now it's a wait and see approach. And look, it's almost like almost every single day that there's a new update. So I'll cut it short here. It's a longer video, but it pains me to say that, it's not looking good. And it's up to the people to speak out. More people that speak out, we just might have a chance to have the United States pressure Israel into saying, you know what, stop this. Maybe they'll listen, but we need more voices. And I'm encouraging you. Your voice is important. Don't let nobody say it's not. Every voice, every anti-war voice is important. If you want to write an article, if you want to do a short video, if you're not an expert, so what? You got opinions, thoughts regarding human life and the preservation of it. Let's hear it, because we need you now more than ever. And so do the displacement of these people. There are Jews and Arabs that are depending on the anti-war voice. And let's make sure our voices are the loudest and not belonging to this extreme, perverse right wing. As always, I will report without bias, without prejudice. And I'll see you in the next update video. Guys, have a good night.